In this week's episode, I'm joined by Charlene Wheeless, she, her, author of You Are Enough, speaker, writer, coach, professional communicator, and a good friend of mine as well. This week, our conversation is about Beyoncé breaking ceilings, Goodell holding the line, disability advocates making moves, and more. Hey there, my name is Bernadette Smith, and I'm a keynote speaker and writer. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to 5 Things in 15 Minutes, my weekly show where I bring good vibes to DEI. That is good vibes to diversity, equity, and inclusion with a little dash of corporate social responsibility. What I found is there are lots of news stories about what's going wrong in the world and lots of negative data. But there are also a lot of things going right. That's what I like to focus on. I search for stories that we can be inspired by and learn from. My hope is to inspire you to experiment with some of these actions and policies to help you build a more inclusive world. Welcome to the show, Charlene. What a treat to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. As always, I'll take any opportunity to see you. So this is great.
Thank you. Will you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, you said the highlights. I am a keynote speaker and author. I work on leadership development journeys, not days. I don't believe in training for a day. I believe in training as a journey. And I really focus on self-empowerment, self-belief, and self-leadership. So those are my passions, particularly for women and women of color.
I love that. And I love your book. Folks, definitely check out Charlene's book. It is really, first of all, it's an inspirational book. Not only you talking about your personal journey, but your professional experiences and how it's all sort of played out. And what I found from the book was just, like a really strong dose of you can do it. You are enough. Obviously that's the title, but I felt really empowered.
Right. Well, my whole mantra is it's choice, not chance, that changes your life. And I think it all starts with understanding that and believing that you are enough, not waiting for someone else to validate you. Right. And so many of us wait for people to validate us. And I talk about in the book, and you'll see if you read kind of the nuance of the book, is really me seeking, finding, and trying to hold on to me in the process, and yeah, so it's an easy read. It was something I really needed to write, not for myself, but for others, really, because I think we all struggle with the same things, but we tend to think that we're alone in it. And so I always said, if I ever write a book, I'm going to write an incredibly honest one. So that's what I did.
Yeah, it is incredibly honest. And especially when you're talking, well, all of it is, but as you're talking about your professional career and some of the barriers that you faced, I think that it sort of shows people a way to stand up for themselves and a way to find their own resilience. And I love that you're sort of giving folks that path through your own journey. And your background is essentially as a professional communicator, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it's really interesting because now that I'm an entrepreneur, people often think, well, why didn't I focus my entire business on communication? And I do quite a bit of communication coaching, which is fairly new for me to come back and embrace communication. But I really decided to focus on self-leadership and self-empowerment and leadership development because I believe if you can help change the mindset of one leader, then you can reach hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. So that's actually why I went more of the direction on leadership. It's where can you make the biggest impact, right? Impact leaders, you impact the world.
I love that. And I think that everyone has the ability to influence others regardless of whether we are leaders. We can influence the people in our family, the people on our block. We can influence all kinds of folks. And one of the things that I wrote about in this week's Five Things newsletter was a little bit about my professional journey. For folks who
Right.
didn't know, I started my first business in 2004 in Massachusetts when that became the first state in the country to have marriage equality for same-sex couples. So my vision for my career at that time was to be an advocate, basically to be an activist wedding planner for these couples. So I'm actually leading a free workshop for folks next week on the 19th. If anyone wants to attend, sort of sharing lessons from my experiences in advocating for marriage equality, lessons that we can take to today about using stories and data. Is that some of the work that you have done as as in your communication? Have you seen that has been effective?
Well, absolutely. And so for me, at my core, I'm a storyteller. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I do. You're never going to get a death by PowerPoint from me because it doesn't really it doesn't add to what I'm trying to do and educate. And I really educate and share through stories. Most of the time, it's my own stories, or it's a story that somehow has come to me. But for people to be really good communicators today, they have to be storytellers because
Mm-hmm.
people want authenticity. They need something that they can relate to or identify with or be in that situation with you. And the best way to do that is through storytelling. And I even tell executives, I said, yes, you can get up and you can give this PowerPoint presentation about a lot of numbers and all of these things that we traditionally do. But if you get up and tell a story, people remember that. I think I have learned that one of the most interesting things about my life is that I spent 4 years as an NFL cheerleader. Well, I spent 20 years not talking about the fact that I was an NFL cheerleader. And for all the reasons that you think, right? People will never take me seriously as an executive. They'll put all these labels on me, well, whatever. But what I've learned is when I stand in front of a crowd and I tell people I was an NFL cheerleader and I say, and then I'm going to tell you how I got from the ball field to the boardroom. And I'm going to
Mm.
tell you the lessons behind that. And usually the first question I get is, what team did you cheer for? And then after that, then people ask me, well, then how did you make that journey? And that all starts because I told a story, not because I said, I'm a 33-year corporate executive,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, actually, for years, I never talked about my career as a wedding planner because of similar things. I was afraid people would think
Right.
I was shallow,
Mhm.
non-corporate, non-experienced, coming from a completely different world. And I was, but there are lots of things that
Mhm.
translated, right? So I get that, the covering that we do. All right, well, let's get into this week's good vibes. The first good vibe this week comes from Spain, where a Spanish court has ruled that single parents deserve the same 32 weeks of parental leave as two parent households. This is expected to become law and improve life for 1.9 million single parent households in Spain. So, Australia and Sweden already have single policies. The US has nothing even remotely close to this.
Right.
But on a similar note, Spain now has workforce protections required for
Mhm.
LGBTQ workers under new regulations, ensuring equal benefits and zero tolerance. So, good news out of Spain.
Absolutely. I'd love to say that the US is probably going to get there, but I'm not going to say that because I try not to say things I don't believe. Right. But fantastic for Spain. And I like you said, with Australia following, and I hope other countries follow. It makes perfect sense. That's the thing. It just makes sense.
So much
Right.
sense. Yeah. Yes, we have a lot of work to do in the US to make sure parents of all types and all types of
Mhm.
families. I mean, there's no even not even any mandatory parental leave. So,
Right, right. I think back to my, 6 weeks of short-term disability, which was
right?
considered, maternity leave at the time, not taking, and that's really so you could heal physically. That wasn't even about bonding with your child or anything. And I
Exactly.
even think now with some companies, I had a client that had just implemented paternity leave, excuse me.
Mm.
But the most of the young men in that company were afraid to take it because they thought they'd be laughed at for taking
Mm-hmm.
it. And I thought, this is just crazy.
It
This
is
is
absolutely
crazy.
crazy. Yeah, absolutely. Got
Yeah,
to
but good
change
on
that.
Spain, right?
Absolutely. All right, the second story this week is from the Grammy Awards, which were a week ago Sunday, where Beyoncé became the first Black woman to win Best Country Album, a historic achievement in a genre long criticized for its lack of diversity.
Mhm.
Big deal for Beyoncé. She was very surprised to win the award, and it
Yeah.
was really cool to see her emotions as well.
Mhm. Yeah, no, of course, I'm a big country music fan. So, well,
Yep.
particularly Darius Rucker, but then also Beyonce. And when her album Cowboy Carter came out, I think I was one of the first people to buy it. But not only did I buy it, I researched it.
Mm.
Because there was so much criticism about the album and her trying to go country. And I don't think people, one, recognize that her roots are in country. She grew
Mm.
up in Houston, but not in the city the whole time. The some of the instruments, people mistakenly say, "Oh, well, just because she used a ukulele or she used this or that, etc." People don't recognize that some of the instruments that she used were actually created by slaves to make a certain
Mm.
sound.
Mm.
She went all the way back, did a lot of research, and this is one of the most inclusive albums that has ever been done. And people don't realize that. They just think that this megastar woke up one day and said, "Hey, I'll go country," and that she just created this country album, but that's not what she did. And so to me, when she won that award, it meant so much more than even what it seemed like on the surface, right?
Mm.
Which is the first Black woman to win this, country album, album of the year, in the country category. But I really encourage people to do some digging on this album and the research, and to see, one, how long and how far she went in making sure that she created an authentic album. And then, of course, Texas Hold'em, I put on Instagram, I think, and LinkedIn for my 60th birthday doing the dance. That's how much I am just
I remember that.
into this piece of music. But it's wonderful on so many fronts. And I think it was great for the Grammys. I think a true success would be when the Country Music Awards
Mm.
acknowledges her work for it. So, not to take anything away from the Grammys, because
Mm-hmm.
the Grammys are outstanding, but I was really thrilled to see that, and it's going on tour. If you haven't heard, I can't wait.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a Cowboy Carter tour, so I'm really looking forward to that too. So,
Awesome.
aren't you? You're probably going, "Why did I ask her about country music?"
No,
Right?
it seems to work out really well that the stories I find seem to somehow align with the guests, at least one of them.
Mm,
And so I figured this would be one that you could really get excited about. Well, and also,
right.
by the way, Beyonce won Album of the Year,
Yes.
biggest Grammy honor as well for that
Mhm.
album. So big
Yes.
deal. Okay, well, this story you might also get excited about, Charlene. Let's see. All right. So, as this third story this week comes from the NFL. So, as DEI
Yeah.
policies face political pushback, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell reaffirmed the league's commitment to inclusive hiring. So, they have what's called the Rooney Rule, which mandates
Mhm.
that minority candidates, women, and people of color have to be considered for open positions. It's
Mhm.
working. It is working in the NFL. They're still doing it. The
Right.
importance, he's recognizing the importance of widening talent pipelines, and
Mhm.
knows that this is sort of a work in progress. So there's got to be a process to get this right,
Mhm.
but they are all in the NFL. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I think I do have to give props to the NFL. The Rooney Rule has been both lauded and criticized from
Hmm.
the standpoint of, okay, yes, you have more people in the pool. Does that mean that you hire more people?
Right.
Or is it just performative? I don't think that the Rooney Rule is performative at all, because you then are being exposed to more qualified people of diverse backgrounds. I know also I should add that the NFL was getting some flack around, we just had the Super Bowl, and in the end zone of the Super Bowl for years has been the sign, the hashtag end racism. And I understand, I didn't even watch the Super Bowl this year, but I had heard that that had come down for this year's Super Bowl. Then I think it's important to note that if it did come down, that would have not been the NFL or Roger Goodell's ruling. The teams have the opportunity to vote on what appears in the end zones there. So I bring that up because I don't want to take away from what the NFL has done, and I really support, obviously, what they're doing. And as I was listening to some of the coverage today, I was remembering that, when I cheered, Doug Williams was a quarterback in the NFL, and he was one of the first Black quarterbacks in the NFL. And now it's quite normal to have a Black quarterback. And I think that is fantastic. Now, of course, that's the team's doing as well, that the owner's doing, but it wouldn't happen if it wasn't accepted by the NFL as an organization as well. So kudos to that.
Absolutely. And the new end zone, by the way, it said choose love, I believe is what it said this year, instead of end racism, which I think choose love may have been on the helmets also. But yes, thank you for that. I do think that, there has to be a level of intention, because otherwise, diversity is not going to increase by accident. And I appreciate that when, efforts to expand the pipeline are being pulled from many companies, that the NFL is definitely holding strong.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. The fourth story this week comes from Uber, where after years of complaints about ride denials for passengers with service animals, Uber now has a self-ID feature to combat discrimination. So over 2 years, organizations like the Seeing Eye collaborated with Uber to design a system that notifies drivers of a passenger's service animal and enforces accountability if a trip is canceled unlawfully. So the idea is to improve access, prevent denials, and also to generate data to address discrimination.
Right. Yeah. This one surprised me when I read about it, because I didn't know that there was an issue with service animals, and so in Uber. So I appreciated that that something has been done. I tell you, I would have preferred there be a law that you were, booted out if you refused. If you refuse to pick up someone who had a service animal, rather than even if they find that you have canceled, I would have just liked to see something a little bit more forward leaning, rather than something that is reactive, right? Because I, quite frankly, don't see what the problem is, right? As someone who has actually had rides canceled on them before, although I can think of a lot of reasons for that have nothing to do with the service animal. But anyway, I just didn't think people had that right to cancel because someone has a service animal. And so I'm really glad to see that is moving forward. Like I said, I would have liked to have seen them be even more aggressive. I mean, quite frankly, if you're an Uber driver and you don't get 4 stars or higher consistently, you can be kind of downgraded, right? So I think you should also be downgraded for the things that are so egregious to me, like not letting someone on with a service animal. And I know that can get, crazy because people have their emotional support animals, and, to me, as long as it's a dog, maybe a cat. I don't know. I think you have cats. I don't have cats, but
not a cat
you don't have cats. Oh, okay, good. But not to discriminate against cats. I'm allergic. That's my whole thing, right?
Me too.
But, I just think emotional support animals are real. That's a very real thing, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm all for it and I want more of it.
Roy has been giving me a lot of emotional support the last month. All right. The last story this week comes from the Center for Discovery, which is a special hospital in Rock Hill, New York. It's a groundbreaking facility uniquely designed for children with complex disabilities, including autism and medical co-occurrences. So it's the only hospital of its kind in the state, and it offers up to 6 months of comprehensive care that integrates medical, behavioral, and therapeutic services with sensory rooms, therapeutic gardens, and caregiver training. So the idea is to keep children with disabilities at home and thriving after they get out of this center, and then rather than in long-term residential placement. So it's really about skill building for these children. I love it.
Right. Yeah, this was another one that kind of blew my mind, actually. I was kind of, because to me, why didn't that exist already? I mean, isn't that
Right?
the whole idea of care, medical care, is that you're caring for the whole person, regardless of this? And I experienced, certainly not to this level, but a similar kind of thing when I had cancer. You went to this doctor for this, and this doctor for this, and this, and this. And I thought, shouldn't all of this be integrated around the whole person? So I'm really glad to see that this hospital, that they're doing what they're doing. I have many friends who have children who have some issue around ability, or situation around a level of ability. And so I'm glad to see that this exists, and I hope that we would see more of it. Right. And people want to be home. They want to be able to live as independently as they can, and that's independently with help to me, in their own homes. And especially for children, there's nothing comforting to a child that looks like a hospital bed, right? So if you can be in your home and you can have that integrated care, that makes perfect sense to me, and good on them.
Yeah, and as more and more facilities start to do this, you can bet that I'll share about them on 5 Things in 15 Minutes. All right. So, Charlene, let's get into this week's Good Vibes to Go. I'm going to share a good vibe to go, and then I'll invite you to share your own good vibe to go. All right. So it's Black History Month. So buy Black by shopping for a beautiful variety of products from tons of merchants. Buy Black's mission is to drive traffic and revenue to Black-owned businesses in order to close the revenue disparity gap between Black-owned businesses and their non-Black counterparts. So I will put that in the show notes.
So my good vibe to go is get your tequila and your fake hair, your tequila from Mexico and your fake hair from China as soon as you can before it goes up 25% with the tariffs coming on. So the good vibe is that, of course, that has all been put on hold. But building off of your point, it is Black History Month, and don't just say, do. I do make it a point to try to what I call buy Black on Black History Month and all year long. And you should know that Amazon also leans into this, so you should be able to find a lot of products. Target has leaned into this very well. I don't know how I feel about this on that one, so that's not going to be a good vibe to go. But I think choose love. That's going to be my good vibe to go.
That's right. Choose love. All right. Good words to end on. Well, Charlene, it is always a treat talking to you, and thank you so much for being on the show. How can folks get in touch with you?
Sure. Of course, the easiest way is on my website, which is charlenewheeless.com. Two S's, one L. I always forget this because I want to say wheelless, like without wheels, but there's only one S. So my website, and you can find me on LinkedIn. You can sign up for my newsletter so that I can stalk you. No, just kidding. But I'm all over Instagram and TikTok and all the social media, although I am getting off X, I should say. But the others I am happily on. And so hit me up anytime.
All right. Well, thanks, Charlene. Always a treat. And folks, if you don't already get the 5 Things newsletter, you can subscribe at 5thingsdei.com. All right, everyone, have a great week. Take care. Thank you for listening to 5 Things in 15 Minutes. I hope you found yourself inspired by at least one of this week's stories. If you did, would you mind sharing it with a colleague and leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform? And if you don't already get my 5 Things newsletter, join at 5thingsdei.com. I'm Bernadette Smith, and I'll see you next week right here for 5 Things in 15 Minutes, bringing good vibes to DEI.